Hey, what's up, everybody? Lessons with Lenski here. We're going to be covering Chapter 4 about culture. This is going to be one of our 4 chapters covering this whole unit. So let's get into it with key issue 1. Where are folk and popular leisure activities distributed? All right, so geographers will study how culture influences behavior, and there's a difference between habit and custom, okay? We talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to dig a little deeper. So habit is repetitive, okay? If I bite my nails, that's a repetitive act performed by me, all right? This college student, this example, wears jeans with colorful patches. That could be a habit of that college student. A custom is a repetitive act performed by a group, all right? So habit is singular, custom is plural, okay? So all college students from the American South wear jeans with colorful patches. So now it's not just one person wearing it, it's multiple, okay? So know the difference between habit and custom when you're talking about cultures, okay? So when we're talking about culture, there's 3 things that are included in kind of the definition or the idea of culture, and that's customary beliefs, material artifacts, and social norms, okay? And these material artifacts can be one of 2 things, either a survival activity or items such as food, clothing, shelter, or a leisure activity such as the arts or recreation, okay? Characteristics of folk and pop culture. We're going to start out with folk culture. I know we kind of grazed over this just a little bit. Folk culture has an anonymous hearth, okay? Not really sure where these things have origins, possibly have multiple places of origin, but we're not quite sure, okay? Unknown dates, unidentified originators, so we don't really know where they are. You can't really track back to the start date, but that is different when we move on to pop culture, which are typically from developed countries, either North America or Europe, and these have traceable or specific people that would be synonymous or started these pop culture items, okay? Moving on to how they diffuse, all right? So folk culture is going to be on a smaller scale, slower transmission from one location to the next, and that's because it's going to really have to be person-to-person interaction. You can't really spread folk culture through things like social media today, okay? Popular culture tends to be transmitted in hierarchical diffusion. So if it's, some sort of new clothing, new music, or new television show, it's going to be diffused top down of the hierarchical sense, where a small group at the top has it and it's slowly spread to different people who might have influence, and then those people will influence people under them, creating a chain of effect of rapidly diffusing these things. Moving on. So distribution is the next thing we're going to look at with folk culture. It's going to be a combination of, there's going to be a couple of reasons why things don't spread or distribute as quickly as pop culture. So with folk, you're going to look at the local physical and cultural factors that influence this. Okay, so you're going to look at isolation. Some of these places might be in a mountainous region where physical barriers such as distance or mountains would prohibit or slow down the distribution of this culture. And that's not a bad thing. It's just going to keep it in a smaller area. Pop culture, widely distributed across many countries. It's going to spread rapidly regardless of these physical factors. Okay? And then at the bottom, the principal obstacle to access is lack of income to purchase the material, okay? So that would be one distribution fault, that it might be hard to, distribute a Gucci t-shirt that's $200 because there's a lack of income to purchase this and spread it. That would be one example of an obstacle that you might experience when distributing a specific cultural items is the monetary value that people don't have the access to them. Cultural regions, all right? So what we see here is a cultural region is a part of the Earth's surface that has a common cultural element, okay? So although the whole region may not identify with a dominant or a common characteristic, that doesn't mean they do identify with a dominant characteristic. That does not mean that in that region, everybody shares that trait. So like I said before with isoline maps, that you might see an area within Wisconsin in the northern area up north, that temperatures in the month of December might be 23 degrees on average in a certain, area. But that doesn't mean that city A and city C still have the same average temps. They might be different, but on average, as that whole area in northern Wisconsin, that is what the average temperature is in December. It's just a generalization, okay? So I'm going to break down the cultural regions into 4 components, and if you're having a hard time following this, wait. The next slide will give you a visual, and then we'll talk about an example, okay? So we're going to look at core, domain, sphere, and outliers. Okay, so those are the 4 components of a cultural region. The core is the heart, the center of this cultural region, where the trait of a given culture is the strongest. Okay, think of it as the heart, really. All right, domain surrounds the core, and these traits are not as strongly expressed, but they're still pretty strong because they're just outside of that area. The sphere is just outside of the domain, and then these traits are not as strongly expressed as the domain. So as you're moving further away from the core, you're seeing less and less of this because of the distance. It's going to eliminate people practicing or finding these cultural things, okay? The outliers mark the edge of the cultural region. I'm going to click to the next slide here because it does give you a visual. I would definitely copy this down. Core in the middle right here. Domain, all right, getting bigger. Sphere, and then out here is the outlier, all right? Past here, it might be very seldom that you see cultural things spread or, past this line out here. So definitely have this down in your notes for the domain sphere. I might ask you some of this stuff on the test. More than likely I will, okay? Moving on to core, domain, sphere example, all right? Mormon religion is primarily found in the Salt Lake City, Utah region, and the domain of the culture is spread out to the parts of Utah and other surrounding states. I'm not going to go through this too much. If you want to copy down these notes, you can, but I think the visual really helps. So here is the visual. The dark green area is where we're going to see a high percentage of these Latter-day Saints, aka Mormons. And then as we get out, this lighter baby puke green, sorry for the description, and then this yellowy color will really be what we looked at here, that sphere. So we have core, domain, core. Oh, hang on. Core, domain, sphere. All right, so dark green, light green, yellow. Sorry about that. You don't really need to know anything about the Mormon religion per se for the test, but they might ask you on the AP test about the Mormon religion just because it's a great U.S. example of these core, domain, sphere examples when we're talking about religion, and religion is another topic that we're going to talk about here in this chapter. Like I said, folk and pop music is going to be such a small part of the test, AP and my test, that it really doesn't make any sense for you to stress out about this. If you'd like to take down the notes, I would definitely recommend that, but don't feel like you need to drill this in your brain heavily. So this is on folk music. This is on pop music. Okay. And if you want to know something different between the two, it's really about how it spreads. Okay. Folk music, going back, originates and is transmitted orally. So just by word of mouth, learning the songs, passing it down to your offspring or your brothers, your sisters, teaching it to somebody, and then the content of these songs are going to be applicable to daily life. Okay. With pop culture, it's more about the money here. Okay, more about spreading it by performing in front of a paid audience and selling CDs, things on iTunes, whatever it might be. And there's really no strong connection with day-to-day life. It's more on a global span of just trying to get people. It's more about entertainment. Let's just say that. All right. Key issue number 2. I'll try to blaze through this one here. Where are folk and pop material culture distributed? Okay. So when we're talking about the material culture, we're talking about clothing, food, shelter. All right. So diffusion, folk material culture diffuses slowly. Just drill this in your head. Folk cultures distribute really slow. Pop culture is meant to spread rapidly. Okay. Folk clothing, another thing, just like music, don't get stressed out about it. So there's some examples down here of, things that are really functional, with these wooden shoes because of the wet climates and the fur-lined boots to protect against cold and Arctic climates. So folk styling is going to be more, functional. Okay, it's not going to be a pair of Jordans. Here's a picture of this gentleman wearing Dutch wooden shoes, riding his bike. If you got kicked in the shin with one of those, you'd probably be crying on the ground, and not gonna lie. And then this is women's dress codes. This might be something to just look over and be able to recognize with some of the cultural norms with women's dress codes. Okay, pop culture preferences. This is really what you kind of see today. Not everybody dresses the same, but there's kind of this designation between different styles based on, your occupation or kind of what you have going on. If you guys were in global, it was a Monday, you might be in sweatpants and a t-shirt. I don't blame you, and I wish I kind of was you. However, if you had midterm defenses or a job interview, you're going to get, spiffy. Girls are going to wear some dresses if that's their thing. Guys might wear a button-up shirt and a tie and some dress pants, okay? So it all depends on kind of what you have going on, okay? Food preferences, here are some for Asia. Rice for mild, moist climates. Maybe you don't like the word moist, get over it. Wheat, drier conditions. Here are some European versions of different food preferences. This is really going to be based on just the environment in general, okay?